even have an alibi as to where he was during the time of the murder?
Well, I can't speak to any other, facets of his defense that weren't raised in court.
Can you tell us what his emotional state is right now?
Well, obviously he's devastated by the verdict, but he's a strong young man, and I think he's determined to vindicate himself through this process.
Cornelius Smith testifying.
Listening to defense attorney for Justin Johnson. That's Luke Evans there laying out the fact that he thought he had a strong case. One of the big pinpoints of this case was the fact that the supposed mastermind of this entire plot, Hernandez Govan, was not called to testify by the defense. The defense said that was not part of their strategy, given the fact that he is a further defendant in this case. And quite frankly, most legal minds would agree that if the defense did call Hernandez Govan themselves, because he was on the witness list, he would have simply pled the Fifth Amendment and would not have wanted to incriminate himself.
Yeah, that was alluded to by Paul Hagerman, the ADA, when he came back for his his final closing statement. He said that he wasn't left off the list. He was, in fact, still a defendant, so obviously protecting himself in that process as well. Now, we have just heard from Young Dolph's partner, Mia J. She just released this statement, and it reads in part, "Today's verdict brings relief and restores my confidence in the justice system. On behalf of my children, family, and myself, I would like to thank law enforcement, the prosecution, and everyone involved for their diligent work in presenting the facts that led to this conviction. We are also grateful to the public for standing with us and advocating for accountability throughout this process." She goes,
"Your outpouring of love and support throughout this process does not go unnoticed. We ask that instead of focusing on those who committed this crime, you focus on the man that Adolph Robert Thornton was. Regardless of the name that you may know him as, such as Adolph, Dolph, or Young Dolph, we ask you to remember the man who enjoyed being a father and spending time with his family. We ask that you remember the man who enjoyed giving opportunities to those who were often overlooked and counted out. We ask that you remember the man who enjoyed giving back to others and being an inspiration to those who come from less than ideal backgrounds, and knowing that they are seen and can change their outcomes and the lives of others by doing something positive. We will continue to heal and keep Adolph's legacy alive. We ask that the
All right,
public...
what's up with the y'all? So, look, man, I know I'm late bringing y'all this update about the Young Dolph situation and stuff like that, but basically, long story short, if you don't know what done took place, which I know a lot of y'all already do, Justin Johnson was sentenced to life. He was found guilty on all charges, which it was obvious. It was just inevitable for him to go to jail because they had him on camera from beginning to the end. I'm going to be posting different videos about this whole situation because I know a lot of different people don't want to sit up and watch the trial for 7-8 hours a day. So I'm going to be bringing y'all the highlights and stuff like that. But basically, a lot of y'all already know what's going on. He was on camera for a whole day, basically. They caught him. He had his daughter with him when he did certain things as well, as far as like riding in a stolen vehicle and driving to different destinations, which I feel like, he definitely don't need to get out of jail because just look at what he did. When I would have looked at my daughter, that would have made me change my mind about all of this. Why would I jeopardize anything? You know what I'm saying? Especially when it comes to losing you, But I digress. People going to do what the hell they want to do, But yeah, Young Dolph's wife, she responded as well to the whole situation, just basically saying that she was thankful for the outcome and this was just basically a piece of the justice that's about to be served, which we already know. More people finna go down. People that ain't been brought up yet and stuff like that. A lot of people think yo guy gonna get in trouble, but you really just don't know how this shit finna play out, man. They really didn't implement him as much, but with that being his company, we never know where this could lead to, you know what I'm saying? But overall, bro, I just want to say RIP to Dolph and send my condolences out. I got the full video of what took place in court today, but I ain't gonna post all of that. I'm just gonna post what I found on the internet a while ago. Basically, prosecutors and stuff like that talking after the fact. Young Dolph's sister actually spoke as well. And I might post a little bit more towards the end of the video too. But, it's just sad and unfortunate, bro. These dudes out here crashing out over chump change. Ain't no way in the world I'm finna go out here and do nothing without at least a down payment, you feel me? But They probably felt like shit, Big Juke was gonna pay like he weigh, you know what I'm saying? And it didn't happen like that. But let me know your thoughts and opinions on everything. RIP the dog, justice for him has been served in one instance, but it's coming. It's gonna be a little rollout, I feel. And condolences to the family. You know, it's really messed up to lose somebody over something like this, because y'all lazy as hell, don't want to get out here and work and grind for what you really want, and you gotta try to do weirdo shit to get paid. Big Juke know he was wrong for setting this all up, if that's what really took place, which we already know that's the truth. But let me know your thoughts and opinions. I ain't got too much more to say about this. I'm gonna come at y'all with some other videos. I just couldn't go without posting this update, showing y'all what the wife said and stuff like that. And I know a lot of y'all gonna say he wasn't married and all that. Get your goddamn ass on. Nobody trying to hear that shit, man. That's his woman. That's who he was in love with. That's who riding for him. That's who got his kids. That's who's carrying on his legacy and all the other type of stuff. So yeah. But hey, let me know your thoughts and opinions, and I'll holler at y'all later.
This is breaking news.
We come on air right now with breaking news. A verdict has been reached in the Young Dolph murder trial.
Suspected shooter Justin Johnson is facing life in prison for this deadly shooting. Let's go right live to the courtroom. Judge Jennifer Johnson has just reconvened.
The jury, have you reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. Four person. If you would stand and read your verdict, please.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder as charged in count 1 of the indictment. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder as charged in count 2 of the indictment. And we, the jury, find the defendant guilty of convicted felon in possession of a firearm as charged in count 3 of the indictment.
Thank you. Juror number 1, is that your verdict? Juror number 34, is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 35, is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 11, is that your verdict? Yes. Juror number 14, is that your verdict?
Yes, ma'am.
Juror number 17, is that your verdict?
Yes, ma'am.
Juror number 27, is that your verdict?
It is, Your Honor.
Juror number 33, is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 25, is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 44, is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 23, is that your verdict?
Yes, ma'am.
Juror number 28, is that your verdict?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you again for your time and attention to this matter this week. Our system of self-government would not work without your service and sacrifice that you've made. Thanks again for your time and attention. You are excused.
Judge excused.
You just heard the verdict and the jury poll live here on Fox 13. That is defendant Justin Johnson, now found guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and guilty on the third charge of being a felon in possession of a handgun. Of course, we've heard testimony over the past 4 days in this trial. Johnson, the lone defendant in this one particular trial, guilty as charged, now facing life in prison.
And we've heard from many suspects. Of course, now Justin Johnson, he was originally the alleged shooter, now being found guilty. We have Cordelia Smith, who the admitted shooter. Several other pieces that will continue to go through this case that will continue to follow as that does take place.
Of course, Smith and Hernandez-Govan are next up as far as the prosecution goes. You heard from Smith earlier in this trial, the other gunman in this situation. He admitted to being there, and he was probably the most damning witness in the prosecution of Justin Johnson, pointing the finger literally on Tuesday afternoon and saying that he, along with Johnson, were the triggermen that gunned down young Dolph back on November 17th of 2021. Of course, this has been a long-awaited trial, and this is by far not over. The sentencing phase probably to come within the next 60 days. We're going to listen back in now as the judge continues. Again, this is Judge Jennifer Mitchell presiding.
Give me a drink.
All rise. This honorable court stands adjourned to Monday morning at 9 a.m.
All right, coming up back to us now in studio. Obviously, they've cut the pool camera situation there. We're going to be going back live to the courtroom outside 201 Poplar here in just a moment. This is our live camera outside the courtroom. Fox 13's Jeremy Pierre is there. He's going to be joining us here in just a moment to give a recap of the day. Of course, Paul Hagerman, the prosecutor, wrapped up his closing arguments about just after lunch today. And before that, Luke Evans, the defense attorney in this situation, wrapping up his. Hagerman, again, he laid out a pretty clear case here in his closing arguments. He was very succinct, saying that the defense ignored the fact that we don't just have a tower camera, we don't just have Valero video and Haven court video. They had 3 different camera angles of the actual shooting that day at Makita's Cookies. But they also had a defendant who admitted to the crime and pointed the finger at Johnson. This was Hagerman's quote this afternoon as he summed up his closing argument, saying, "We got Justin Johnson's actual phone." That's Fox 13's Jack Bilyeu as he makes his way through the hallway there. They pulled phone records that linked Justin Johnson to Big Jook, of course, one of the other people who is he's now passed, being murdered back this past January, linking him to the supposed real mastermind behind all of this, along with Hernandez Govan. Let's go now to Fox 13's Jeremy Pierre. He's live outside on Poplar. Jeremy, the deliberations didn't last long. The jury was handed this case shortly before 1 o'clock, and at 4:08, the judge read the verdict.
Yeah, less than 4 hours. Let me tell you, because they had some time to eat some lunch. And then over lunch, they began deliberating over lunch. The judge gave them that opportunity to do that. And you hear just less than 5 minutes ago, the guilty verdict, finding Justin Straight Drop Johnson guilty on all counts: conspiracy to first degree murder, as well as convicted felon in possession of a gun. Now this, again, coming less than 4 hours after this verdict, after this jury began deliberation. And let me tell you, it's been a very emotional week, not only for the family of young Dolph, but especially the city of Memphis, because everyone loved young Dolph for his music, for his contributions to the community. But this right here, coming again after 4 emotional days, especially with all the information that we learned coming out of this trial, knowing who actually happened to be behind it, and then the surprise of not seeing Hernandez Govan take the stand. A lot of emotion, a lot of surprises all throughout this week. Now, we did speak to Shelby County District Attorney Steve Moroy, who really didn't want to go into details as to why we didn't see Hernandez Govan take the stand, and as well as other people involved in this case that happened to be named. Needless to say, Anthony Big Jook Mims, understanding why they didn't get an indictment over his case or his involvement in this case. Now, for sure, we're waiting right now for people to start making their way out of the courtroom. We already have seen the family of young Dolph make their way out of the courtroom. We possibly very well may hear from them as to their emotion behind this guilty verdict. Justice finally coming to them nearly 3 years after the shooting death of young Dolph on airways in front of Makita's. Definitely a lot of information that have come out, a lot of information that we've heard in the past, but now this week it's confirmed. Darryl.
First of all, let's talk about, you talked about the emotional nature of testimony over the past 4.5 days. Talk to us about this morning specifically. As I said in the opening here, Paul Hagerman, the assistant DA who was in charge of this case for the prosecution, he laid out he almost retried the case this morning. And when you listen to his closing arguments, and he laid out a very succinct argument over why that guilty verdict should be read. What about emotions this morning? It seemed that it was a more stoic nature in the courtroom as compared to the last couple of days.
Well, starting off with the defense, with their closing argument, they came in hot, needless to say, but Paul Hagerman then took over, and he shut every doubt for the jury, shut it down. Because for the simple fact of, you have every piece of evidence that the prosecution pointed out, the surveillance video, that was in the opening statement. And then as the trial progressed, you saw the digital forensics that pointed straight to Justin Johnson as well as Cornelia Smith. We're talking about phone calls that have been made 24 minutes before the murder. And then the phone calls that Cornelia Smith, who even took the stand, even pointed to a FaceTime with the, I guess you would say, the real mastermind behind the plot to kill young Dolph, who we later found out, Anthony Big Jook Mims. That all pinpointed out with digital forensics from MPD.
Jeremy, you alluded to this earlier. We really thought that we would hear from the alleged mastermind, Hernandez Govan, and we didn't. So, again, very surprising turn there.
Yeah, and let me tell you, speaking with Steve Mulroy, the Shelby County District Attorney, he said their case was very strong without his testimony. For the simple fact that, look, they had all of the evidence. They didn't need another voice on that stand. That voice right there, I really think the defense was pending on that voice of Hernandez Govan, because if you go back to that closing argument, they were hoping, it sounds as though they were hoping Hernandez Govan took the stand because there was no clear point to connect Hernandez Govan to Justin Johnson. And we even asked Steve Mulroy about that connection between Hernandez Govan and Justin Johnson.
Jeremy, stand by for a second. Don't go anywhere. We just got a statement from the DA's office. DA Steve Mulroy saying every murder is a tragedy and we take them all seriously. This one generated extra public interest because young Dolph was a prominent and beloved member of the community. We will continue to fight hard to make sure that all of those responsible for his death are brought to justice. Now, that full statement is actually pretty lengthy. We're going to have the entire statement on fox13memphis.com. Again, that a prepared statement from District Attorney Steve Mulroy. Now, as we bring Jeremy back in, Jeremy, one of the contentious parts of this trial was the fact that there was no forensic evidence that actually tied Justin Johnson to this vehicle. I know the defense, or I should say the prosecution at first was a little caught, I'm not going to say caught off guard, but that was one chink in their armor.
Yeah, and let me tell you, that was one chink in their armor. I believe right now we're about to hear from Shelby County District Attorney Steve Mulroy. Here he is.
Other side, guys. You tell me when you're ready. Great. All right. Well, so we are obviously gratified by the jury's decision. We are very gratified that justice has been done in this case, and we will continue to make sure that all of those who are responsible for young Dolph's death receive the punishment they deserve. And I want to give a hearty congratulations to the trial team, not only Paul Hagerman and Iris Williams, but everybody involved who really worked very hard on this case and got a great result and did a great job. So congratulations to them, and I'd sure like to have them speak to you as well.
I think it's been a long, hard week for everybody. It's been a long, hard week for Dolph's family too. They're back behind us. It's been a process getting here, a couple of years now, and great result this week. A lot of hard work went into it. A lot of love from their family went into it, and appreciate the jury verdict. We did it.
Let me ask you this. A lot of people, we've been posing this question to Mr. D.A. Mulroy for all week. Hernandez Govan. The importance of having him involved obviously wasn't important. Can you speak on that?
I mean, you saw the proof at the trial, and obviously we heard other names about people's involvement. There's two defendants, there's Mr. Smith and Mr. Govan, whose cases are not disposed of yet. We have to proceed one at a time. Mr. Johnson first, and that business finishes today. and we'll move on to the other defendants.
And when you heard the defense in their closing argument basically point out that DNA on that car, how did you all attack that? Because obviously it was 3 people's DNAs that was found on that car, but Justin Johnson's wasn't.
Yeah, so you got the facts you got, and you got the evidence you got. We heard testimony that the car had been wiped down and cleaned, and we know it was moved and everything else, and we were able to explain to the jury why those 3 individuals' fingerprints were in that car. And so the jury heard all the proof and they understood it, and I think we painted a real clear picture of both before, during, and after the murder. The investigation did a fabulous job of highlighting sort of all 3 of those times and answering a lot of questions that a lot of murder cases you never get answered. We had a strong case and it went good.
And I'd like to add also, I should also be complimenting the law enforcement investigative team. They did an excellent job in this case, and I don't want to leave them out. You don't always get fingerprint evidence. You don't always get DNA evidence in every case, and it is certainly possible to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt with any of that, and the proof in the pudding is what happened today.
Now, we haven't heard from the family, understandably so far, but you have worked closely with them. What have their emotions been like throughout the trial, and especially today getting that news?
Well, in the trial, during this trial, they have been patient, and they've been together the whole time, and they small little room they're in before they go in the courtroom. I know this thing's been hard for them, but they've been a unit, and they've been solid with each other and solid with us during this trial. It's a hard trial, and they've been great during it.
You made a point in there to highlight how corroborating evidence was one of the most important aspects of your case, and the fact that witness testimony lined up with corroborating evidence. If you want to speak to that.
Well, this is so important. I mean, I think that sometimes when you try particularly violent cases like this, sometimes your witnesses are not the best characters. I think, like I told the jury, there's many witnesses over the cases I've tried through the years. I wouldn't trust them with my car keys or whatever else. But when you can point to other evidence that corroborates their testimony and their account and proves to you that what they're saying, despite who they are, is true, then that's incredibly important in a trial.
This has been a long time coming for obviously the family of Young Dolph and fans as well. I guess, what would you say to them now that there's a guilty verdict?
Well, I mean, what I would say is that justice has been done, at least so far, and our efforts will continue to make sure that everybody who's responsible for Young Dolph's death is held accountable. And you've seen us do that so far with 2 defendants, one by guilty plea and one by guilty verdict, and our work will continue. Take maybe one more question.
What's next for Cornelius Smith?
Mr. Smith's case will be reset until November. Like I told the jury, like I told the court, there'll be a point where he goes to prison, but we'll have to wait.
So thank you all very much, and the family has said that they are available to talk to you, and so I certainly encourage you to do that. Thank you all very much.
All right, you've been listening to Shelby County District Attorney Steve Mulroy. They're outside the courtroom. Again, the verdict in. Justin Johnson guilty as charged of 3 counts. Now, the judge in this case, Jennifer Mitchell, you heard her presiding over the case all week. She has already sentenced Johnson to life in prison for that first-degree murder charge. The other 2 charges, the conspiracy to commit murder and the felon in possession of a weapon, those 2 charges also found guilty, but sentencing on those 2 charges will come here over the next few days, possibly a few weeks, depending on how Judge Jennifer Mitchell handles this. Now, Jeremy Pierre is still live outside the courtroom with us. We just heard from Steve Mulroy, and his quote to begin it all, gratified that justice has been done in this case. Let's go back out to the courtroom. This is the family of Young Dolph.
Rolling. On November 17, 2021, our lives changed forever. A son, a father, a brother, a friend, a businessman, a music artist, a philanthropist, and life partner are all among just some of the titles that my brother Adolph Robert Thornton Jr. held. Titles that have now left a missing piece in the lives of so many. I want to say thank you to the jury for their service and decision in this case to bring us one step closer to justice for our family, friends, supporters, and the community that has supported us during this time. Thank you to Judge Mitchell, Shelby County District Attorney's Office, including Paul Hangerman and his team, the MPD, U.S. Marshals, Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, and other investigators and staff that assisted us with this investigation and case, ensuring that those responsible for this crime and involved with this crime have and will be brought to justice for their actions. We realize this act of violence has impacted so many outside of our family and friends. Your outpouring of love and support throughout this process does not go unnoticed. We ask that instead of focusing on those who committed this crime, you focus on the man that Adolph Robert Thornton was. Regardless of the name that you may know him as, such as Adolph, Dolph, or Young Dolph, we ask you to remember the man who enjoyed being a father and spending time with his family. We ask that you remember the man who enjoyed giving opportunities to those who were often overlooked and counted out. We ask that you remember the man who enjoyed giving back to others and being an inspiration to those who come from less than ideal backgrounds, and knowing that they are seen and can change their outcomes and the lives of others by doing something positive. We will continue to heal and keep Adolph's legacy alive. We ask that the public and the media continue to keep our family in their prayers, as well as continue to respect our privacy during this time and the next steps of the judicial process as justice is served for all those involved for our loved one. Thank you.
Sister, she's giving emotional words there, asking that we remember young Dolph for his philanthropy, giving back to the community that he loved. Again, not the first sibling that we've heard from, but first we're going to go to Jack Bilyeu, who is with the defense attorney, Luke Evans.
Wanted the jury to be aware of that we believed were sufficient enough to create reasonable doubt and support our position that Mr. Johnson did not, in fact, do this.
You know, in particular, y'all talked about that Bass Pro hat.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's a mass-produced item that was being worn in somewhat of a faddish way by several influential people or rappers and different famous individuals, and we wanted to try to point that out as best we could.
So you mentioned it's kind of a long road ahead as far as appealing.
Sure. Yeah, obviously it takes time, but you know the wheels turn slow sometime on justice as it relates to Mr. Johnson, as in all defendants that are in this predicament. But you know, we just got to push forward and continue to, you know, fight for the just result.
And what's at stake here? I mean, Johnson faces life.
That's correct. He does face life, and he's going to be on the murder count. He's going to be sentenced on the other counts in November. But I mean, the rest of his life is at stake, obviously. So it's high stakes. It's very important to him, obviously, that he continue to litigate and fight for his freedom.
You know, Smith went on the stand, basically, you know, said it was the two of them. How can, you know, why shouldn't we believe what he said?
I think all you got to do is listen to his testimony to get the answer to that.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, obviously I pointed out reasons in my closing argument and in my cross-examination for our concern about whether or not he was being truthful.
What do you want to see happen with Govan and Smith?
Well, obviously, you know, that's something where, you know, that was argued heavily. Where is Hernandez Govan? Where was he in this trial? Why wasn't he here? Obviously, if he's a defendant in this case, and to the extent he's involved, he needs to be held accountable.
Did he play a huge role in your defense, Hernandez-Govan?
Well, it's interesting to say, but to the extent he wasn't called by the state, that was definitely a shock to us, based on the position of their prosecution. And when he wasn't called to testify, I felt it was significant, and caused a significant gap in their case.
You plan to appeal the conviction?
Yes.
Can I ask you this? It's very odd. Did your client even have an alibi as to where he was during the time of the murder?
Well, I can't speak to any other facets of his defense that weren't raised in court.
Can you tell us what his emotional state is right now?
Well, obviously he's devastated by the verdict, but he's a strong young man, and I think he's determined to vindicate himself through this process.
Cornelius Smith testifying.
Listening to defense attorney for Justin Johnson. That's Luke Evans there laying out the fact that he thought he had a strong case. One of the big pinpoints of this case was the fact that the supposed mastermind of this entire plot, Hernandez-Govan, was not called to testify by the defense. The defense said that was not part of their strategy, given the fact that he is a further defendant in this case. And quite frankly, most legal minds would agree that if the defense did call Hernandez-Govan themselves, because he was on the witness list, he would have simply pled the Fifth Amendment and would not have wanted to incriminate himself.
Yeah, that was alluded to by Paul Hagerman, the ADA, when he came back for his his final closing statement. He said that he wasn't left off the list. He was, in fact, still a defendant, so obviously protecting himself in that process as well. Now, we have just heard from young Dolph's partner, Mia J. She just released this statement, and it reads in part, "Today's verdict brings relief and restores my confidence in the justice system. On behalf of my children, family, and myself, I would like to thank law enforcement, the prosecution, and everyone involved for their diligent work in presenting the facts that led to this conviction. We are also grateful to the public for standing with us and advocating for accountability throughout this process." She goes on to say that this is just the beginning of our journey toward achieving full justice for Adolph, and will patiently support the unfolding of that process.
So again, as we wind down our coverage here at 4:30 this afternoon, Justin Johnson found guilty on all three counts that he faced in the murder of young Dolph. The most serious charge, of course, the capital murder offense, first-degree murder, guilty. He has already been sentenced to life by Judge Jennifer Mitchell, just as she read that verdict. The other two counts, conspiracy to commit murder, along with the felony gun charges, guilty on those counts as well, but he will be sentenced at a later date. So Justin Johnson is now facing life in prison. Of course, we've got reporters there, as you've seen. We've got Jeremy Pierre still working the hallways at 201 Poplar. Jack Bilyeu will continue talking to the defense attorney, Luke Evans. We've got complete team coverage coming your way in 25 minutes. Please join us on Fox 13 News at 5.